Welcome back to Brashenomics, and as we were just talking about reviewing things on a yearly basis, keeping some type of annual review going with the people you're working with. Well, certainly real estate has been something maybe people don't want to look at over the last few years. Nobody likes to feel like they're getting poorer and poorer just because they're owning a house. But now things are starting to change, People want to see their house value go up. People are probably logging into Zillow like, oh, I made $50,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is last month. And what this is really doing is changing some of the options or opportunities people have that they didn't have maybe as little as 6 months ago, 12 months ago, or 2 years ago, which is why it's so important to continually understand what's going on in your financial situation and real estate situation. Stephen Macdonald joins us, real estate broker with John L. Scott. Stephen, welcome back. 2 days in a row.
Come on, Ben. Good to see you. What a beautiful day from your studio here. Blue sky in Seattle. Isn't that good times?
It is, especially yesterday how I was bringing up how we don't have summer.
Yeah,
Somebody was listening.
Somebody was listening.
That's right. You've seen, I'm sure, being in the real estate world, you're seeing house prices change, go up over the last 6 months, the last year. That's really giving people different opportunities, isn't it?
That's right, Ben. The big thing I'm seeing right now, there's a lot of people out there who have been trapped. Their value of their property really is the same as the debt on their property. So what is their options? And they're stuck in a situation. They're trying to communicate with a bank. What do we do? Their life's on hold. And it seems the more people out there's a lot of people who have their life on hold and they don't know what to do. They've checked the math out. Can we sell it? What can we do? Can we rent it? It hasn't worked out. But what I'm seeing today, I see some really, really good news today, is that there's actually a lot more options. The rental market has increased. The value of properties is starting to increase. So there's a lot more options. The banks are actually being more flexible, even with loan modifications. So I think if you're in that position where you don't know what to do and your life's on hold, I think today is a good day for us to just have a look at things and reconnect and redo the numbers to see if we have some options.
It's interesting to say life on hold, though, because in some ways, shouldn't people just feel comfortable? Okay, I'm in my house. You don't have to put your life on hold. Maybe just their plans to move.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, Ben, because a lot of people I speak to have that trapped sensation. And the idea is they've outgrown their house, or maybe their child's gone to college. It's time to move on with their life. But you can't do that because you have this debt tied in with an asset that's just not going to move. So that stops them. And I see a lot of people who now...
There's some paralysis almost.
Yes, exactly.
So when you start looking at the options that are available, I know from the mortgage side you start seeing them where people have been able to lower their monthly payment, but from the real estate side, where do you see some of these options fitting in?
Well, what I see is some people who couldn't sell their home, for example, maybe 6 months or a year ago, and the reality was nobody really wanted to buy some houses in some price points, and it was just not a good investment. But what we're seeing now is there's a lot of people want to buy, and there's actually a shortage of homes. So what we're looking at, if somebody goes on to like a automated valuation system, like a Zillow, for example, they do a market analysis and the house value comes up $350,000. But the reality is today it might be $375,000 because all these appraisals of homes are based on historic facts. And today, over the last 2 months, we've seen some substantial growth. So the good news is it might not be a $350,000 home. You might just need that extra $30,000, $40,000 that somebody's now willing to pay because there's not many homes available on the market.
And so now you put people where people can be in a position where whether they decide to stay or not, isn't just having that option. I mean, that alleviates that feeling of being trapped because you think, well, at least I could sell it if I want to.
Right.
At least I could make a move if I wanted to.
Exactly. And I think that's the big thing that I feel today is really strong is we have to look at our options. Even with the rental market, I've seen an increase in rent going from maybe $1 a square foot, which is a really common indicator locally here in Bellevue. But the idea, I'm seeing things renting now for $1.05, $1.10 a square foot. I even noticed in San Francisco that the rents are up like 15% this year, 15%. So if you're working on a really tight margin, my options are I just have to stay. Maybe you just rent it out and you can move on to your next season of life.
So kind of you get both. You're saying, if I'm hearing you correct, you have two options because house prices are going up and rents are going up.
Right.
You may have the ability to move out and rent your house.
Right.
Or you may have the ability to sell it.
Exactly. In fact, one thing that surprised me is the rental market has increased substantially more than the house value market, even though both are strongly going in a good direction.
So how do you advise somebody to make those choices?
Well, I think what I'm seeing today, we have to go back and revisit go to your realtor, go to your property manager, look at the math. About is it a good idea to be a property manager again? Is it a good idea to sell? Let's revisit the math and the calculations as to how to go forward and get some fresh numbers from today's values as opposed to even 2 months ago.
And that really would allow people to understand because, well, if you can rent it out, you figure out, is it going to cash flow?
Right.
If you can sell it, you figure out how much you owe. I mean, there's some of these numbers that really start to make sense and you can put into your budget or I guess just figure it out and if it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You know, one thing, Ben, I know you don't want to be a property manager, Ben. We talked yesterday. You don't want to clean toilets or fix toilets. I have a slightly different opinion of that one, Ben. You know,
you look like you could clean some toilets.
I see. You like that? It's just about, yeah. I think I appreciate that. I take that as an honor. But I would say that a lot of people don't want to pay the 10%, which is a typical fee for a property manager, and that can really knock off your math when you're trying to rent a property. But today, there's so much online information. There's a tenant screening service. There is great contracts online. There's also some really good resources if you want to be an employer or a tenant property manager yourself.
And so that puts people in a position where if they do choose to, maybe it doesn't make sense if you have to go hire a property manager. But it may make sense if you want to take that on as your own second job.
Exactly. So an option is if you do the math and it's too tight, you can't afford a property manager, you can still rent it yourself. And there's some great resources that can help you save that 10% that would cost you typically per month.
What do you see as one of the biggest reasons? Is it typically financial that somebody would do it themselves? Do some people take it as a hobby? I mean, you know, you've been in that investment arena for a long time. You probably see a lot of people who decide they want to try it or why is that?
Well, I think property management is obviously the easier option. And with residential real estate, there's more emotions. If somebody moves in, that's their castle. And typically there's more emotions as opposed to an office building or a manufacturing building. So from a property management perspective, typically houses are a lot more emotional and hands-on. But I would say that with all the systems in place, that people can actually property manage a lot easier today. And there's some great resources online as to what the law is and the standard contracts you can use.
But isn't that one thing that people can screw up? I mean, people can screw up those contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, most of the contracts today are standard templates, right? And I think it's pretty hard to screw up a template.
There's
what do you think?
the fill in the blank, right?
Yeah, what's the least amount? Exactly.
In the new age, Mad Libs.
Right, exactly. So I would say as long as you're doing generic real estate and I would even go to get some counsel, pay $100, $200 to an attorney and have it reviewed. But the big thing I see with property management is doing your pre-contract due diligence, get your tenants screened and really look at that. Have they paid their bills before? Where are they coming from? Do a little due diligence because there's so many people want to rent in this area and there's so few homes that today you can actually choose, you can cherry pick out phenomenal tenants.
You know, it's interesting you talk about, having counsel or whatnot and finding those right, whether it's for the contract and then actually finding the right tenants, because if you already own a rental house right now, this is another point in time where you can go, well, these maybe aren't the best tenants.
Right.
Or, and obviously you need to make sure the lease would allow you to not renew it, I suppose.
Right.
But, understanding that rents have gone up.
Right.
And when we start talking about things like CFARE that come around every year or tax time that comes around every year, renewing different plans that come around every year, a lease is really one of those. And there are people who just rent out houses for years and years, or for years and years and years that never change the rent.
I've noticed that some people, like the person yesterday, have a duplex and they keep the same rent for 5 years. Well, the rents have increased very dramatically in the last maybe 6 months to a year. One thing I really like about today, talking about CFARE and the times, Ben, is that real estate, I think, time will cure your real estate problems. It's just time. And as we're going through this process right now, time is actually curing a lot of these problems. So you might be cured in your situation and you still think you're in a tough spot with no options.
That's interesting.
So I think you have to go back and say, are we better? Are we back on track? Are we in a positive position? Can we now sell our property? Can we now rent it?
What year prices are we back to here in like the greater Seattle area? Are we back to 2011? Are we back to 2010? Are we back to 2009?
Well, locally in downtown Bellevue, I think we're back maybe 2009, 2010. But I would say that it's a very, very random question because every area is different. Right now, I'm seeing in some smaller price range homes, I would say there's some very healthy shifts in price point. The higher price range I'm still seeing is way down 2003 to 2004 price points.
And so we're not quite, time hasn't quite cured the people who bought at the top.
Right, I think so. I think we're still got a way to go. I think in the lower price ranges, there's some real healthy movement. In the higher price points, we're still in the tall grass. Put it that way.
Well, you start to see, but that's kind of the natural progression, right? I mean, the people have to buy the less expensive houses,
Right.
So the people who own those houses can buy the next one, and
Right.
it's this kind of domino effect.
Right. And it seems to me that people who want to rent, you have a standard people who always want to rent in an over history, 30 years. But today, we will also have these same people. Then we have a shortage of homes for sale. Then we have people who went through a distressed situation and they can't buy. So that's added to that market. Now we have a whole new generation of people coming through, and there hasn't been a lot of new construction. So in this area, it seems a very tight and quite a critical area. So I would see actually holding on to your property and renting it is a very healthy choice right now.
Especially if it makes sense. We're here with Stephen Macdonald, real estate broker with John L. Scott. Stephen, just about a minute left before we have to go to break. When you start thinking about renting that property or selling it, do you have to do a little bit of soul searching, don't you? Because it is work to rent it. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, you just go rent the house. And yesterday we had Hank Coleman on from moneyqa.com who said, the accidental landlord.
Right.
But people do have to be a little bit weary. Everybody seems so busy.
Right.
Everybody's got stuff going on. It is another project, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, renting is definitely an occupation, and it can take, if you have one home, not a big deal. You get to 4, 5, and then 10. Traditionally, people might sell their homes and move into multifamily, into larger developments. But yes, property management can be an issue. I think the way to resolve that is set up systems to resolve it. Have a direct deposit with your money from the rents, having a maintenance program, being proactive. Yeah, I hear all these stories, Ben. I think you think every rental property has a leaky toilet. Is that what you think?
I do. Well, that's all anybody talks about. The leaky toilet at 2 a.m. Eric over here, I swear if he ever owns a rental property,
I do own rental properties, and thankfully.
And then how often do the toilets leak?
It's happened once.
Yeah?
Yeah, thankfully it hasn't happened a lot.
So every year at Seafair, the toilet leaks. Is that what happens?
Yeah, it's one of those things.
We
just put it on the schedule.
But the big thing, Ben, is I think we have options now. We're definitely coming in a more positive market, and we can relook at the figures we did before.
Well, Stephen, I think, as we talked about with Seafair coming around, always knowing what your options are, being able to review those. And if you're not able to understand or do those yourself, then having somebody like you in their real estate corner is a really big asset.
Absolutely. And I think with values today, we have to relook at that. What is the value today?
Well, excellent information. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, man.
And you're taking off on another. You get back from San Diego. Now you're going overseas. You're a busy guy.
Come on. All right, Ben. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah. When we come back, we are going to talk about more things that you can review on an annual basis. John Hugg will join us here in just a minute. You're listening to Brashenomics.